Republicans dominate on election night, and the results bring a big boost for plans to allow public funding for private schools.
All families in the state of Texas deserve school choice, and that's going to happen.
But is Governor Abbott's plan truly a done deal? We look at the potential path for education savings accounts after the election.
We are seeing tonight generational change in South Texas.
Historic gains for Texas Republicans and fallout for Texas Democrats. The change is happening now after losses in traditional blue strongholds. A victory in Texas helps Republicans win control of the U.S. Senate. Why that win could help John Cornyn land one of the most powerful positions in American politics.
Produced from the Capitol in Austin and airing statewide, this is the award-winning State of Texas.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm Josh Hinkle. Republicans expanded their dominance of Texas politics on election night. By now, you know the story at the top of the ticket. Donald Trump overwhelmingly beat Kamala Harris, and Ted Cruz won re-election despite being outspent by Democrat Colin Allred. But deeper down the ballot, Republicans flipped judicial seats held by Democrats, and the GOP also gained seats in the Texas House. Those results had Governor Greg Abbott taking a victory lap of sorts. His efforts to push for legislation to allow public funding for private schools appears poised for success. Abbott attempted to push that legislation in the last session and a series of special sessions, but opposition from within his own party kept it from moving forward. So the governor threw his support behind candidates who would support that type of legislation, and at an event in Tyler on the day after the election, Abbott said those efforts appear to have paid off.
I made sure that we would elect Republicans to the Texas House of Representatives in sufficient number to be able to pass a school choice plan just like the Texas Senate has passed many times. Counting what I call only true hardcore school choice proponents, there are 79 votes in favor in the Texas House. It takes 76 votes to get it passed.
The next legislative session starts in January, but lawmakers can begin filing bills next week. We want to dig deeper into what happens after the election. Joining us for insight, Lauren McGaughy, the investigative reporter and editor for the Texas Newsroom at NPR, and Larry Gonzales, a Republican former Texas state representative. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you very much.
So, Lauren, we want to start with a bit of election fallout that you covered closely. Gilberto Hinojosa resigned as chairman of the Texas Democratic Party after the election losses, but also some controversial comments he made in an interview with the Texas Newsroom. What happened there?
Well, I think this was a pretty bit of surprising news this week, at least from my perspective. You know, we called the chairman after the election losses to get his perspective, and he had some thoughts on how immigration and transgender rights affected candidates at the polls, in his view. And so we put those out there, and he was forced to apologize. And then this morning he resigned. He framed it as just it's time to turn the torch over to a new generation. He's in his 70s and he's had his leadership challenge before, but people were telling me that those comments kind of hastened his resignation.
Well, Larry, these election results obviously bring a lot of new faces to the Texas House, as you're probably aware, very well. How does that change affect what happens at the ledge?
You know, there's going to be 32 new freshmen in the Texas House. That is not an insignificant number to contemplate. For a variety of reasons, there's 12 to 18 new chairmen. That's out of 34 standing committees to have 12 to 18 new chairmen. So there's going to be a lot of people in leadership positions that are going to be in charge. For the freshmen, welcome to the Texas House, and you need to jump in and get busy. Hopefully they bring their experience that they have in their previous life to the Capitol, and we plug them in and get them going.
Well, I want to get a take from both of you on the future of education savings accounts. Is Governor Abbott's school choice plan a done deal at this point? Lauren, we'll start with you.
Well, he says it is, right? I think we'll have to wait and see. There's going to be a lot of jockeying around who wins the speakership of the House, and I think that could potentially move around some votes depending on, where the speaker comes down on this and what alliances are made. That can always change, even right up to the day where they're voting on legislation.
How do you see it?
There are a lot of variables at play, to her point, but at the end of the day, the votes are there. What the bill looks like, what's included, are you still going to get the other things that were, right, the bill had teacher pay raise, had school safety, had a lot of other things, basic allotment. So the last bill had a lot of things in it. What will this one have? I'm not sure. But at the end of the day, I think the votes are there to move ESAs.
Larry, were there particular races or results that stand out to you from election night that we haven't talked about?
Yeah, when you look at the Rio Grande Valley and some of those races, there were two congressional races that were closer than people thought they were going to be. Senator LaMantia, lost her race in the Texas Senate as well. And I know the Democrats were looking at 7 races in the Texas House, and they weren't even close. I mean, the Republicans won pretty overwhelmingly. So I think a lot of Democrats were surprised by that. At the end of the day, there wasn't a whole lot of change. The Republicans are up a couple in the House. They're up 1 in the Senate. But overall, overarching, each chamber stays remarkably the same as far as the makeup of the body goes.
Lauren, what stood out to you?
Yeah, outside of the legislature, there was also some hopes among Democrats to be able to get some seats at the statewide level in the judicial races. That didn't happen at all. And I thought it was really interesting to watch how Houston voted, Harris County this time. This is thought of as yet another blueberry in the red soup, and that was not the case. In fact, Harris won that area by a smaller margin than Joe Biden did. And so we kind of saw the entire state, even parts of the state that tend to vote more Democratic, shift to the right.
What to look forward to? Any takeaways that we can actually think are going to happen down the line?
I'm looking for Texas's involvement in the next Trump administration. There are several statewide officials or thought leaders from Texas that may be tapped for administration posts or just might have some say in policymaking. So I'm really interested to see how, it's kind of so goes Texas, so goes the nation. Maybe we'll see that with Donald Trump back in the White House.
Any takeaways for you?
I'm very much watching the budget. There's a lot of priorities there. You've got some huge bills coming up. I think the electric grid is still a very active topic. Water is going to get a lot of attention this session. Senator Perry has some wonderful ideas as far as water infrastructure goes. So you always watch that because the budget is a public statement of priorities. You can have some wonderful policy ideas, but if there's not the money to pay for it, then those don't happen. So always watch the budget, and that will tell you where the priorities are.
You two sound like you know what you're talking about.
Not my first time.
Well, thank you both for being with us.
All right, thank you very much.
Tonight, the people of Texas have spoken.
Ted Cruz claims victory in the race for Senate, and that could help the state's other senator.
And our country needs to make some tough choices, and we're the ones that make those on behalf of our constituents.
The looming vote that could put John Cornyn in a new position of power.
What the Republican Party represents now is what we stand by.
Democratic strongholds turning red. We look closer at the results in South Texas and how it could shape state and national politics moving forward. Texas law already bans most abortions, but voters in one city considered going a step further. The outcome for a proposal to add restrictions on women leaving the state to seek an abortion, and what comes next. Ted Cruz declared a resounding victory on election night. His campaign expected to win, but the margin was a surprise. Cruz got nearly 1 million more votes than challenger Colin Allred. Cruz gave his victory speech Tuesday night in Houston. He declared the election a mandate, but Cruz also extended a bit of an olive branch to Democrats who did not support him.
You have my word that I will fight for you, for your jobs, for your safety, and for your constitutional rights. But tonight, the people of Texas have spoken. And their message rings clear as a bell across our great state. Texas will remain Texas.
Allred gave his concession speech Tuesday night in Dallas. He alluded to how Cruz helped Donald Trump challenge the results of the 2020 presidential election. Allred said even though he lost this election, the battle is not over.
This country is worth fighting for. Understand that. This state is worth fighting for. We are a great country. Nobody needs to make us great again.
Allred will serve out his term in Congress, representing District 32 in the Dallas area. Since he ran for Senate, he could not be reelected. Democratic State Representative Julie Johnson won the seat on Tuesday night, she makes history as the first openly gay person to represent Texas in Congress. Cruz's victory helped Republicans take control of the U.S. Senate, and that could put the state's other senator in a new position of power. Senator John Cornyn is one of 3 candidates hoping to succeed Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell. That's one of the most powerful positions on Capitol Hill. We spoke to Cornyn when he voted early and asked about the race for majority leader.
And I feel like I'm ready to assume those responsibilities. But in the end, it's not about me and it's not about the other candidate. It's about what our country needs. And our country needs to make some tough choices. And we're the ones that make those on behalf of our constituents. So I'm looking forward to it, but I understand the responsibility.
Cornyn said Republicans will meet Wednesday to vote for their nominee for leader.
It's just a real abject Democratic collapse.
Victories for Republicans in South Texas raise questions on the political future of border counties. We take a closer look at the races that turned an historic Democratic stronghold red. Texas law already bans most abortions, but voters in one city considered going a step further. The outcome for a proposal to add restrictions on women leaving the state to seek an abortion, and what comes next. On election night, Texas Republicans celebrated new victories in a historic Democratic stronghold. Parts of South Texas turned red for the first time in decades. Those victories raise a big question. Is this an anomaly or a sea change that could sway Texas politics for years to come? Our Ryan Chandler spoke with a Republican leader on the border and breaks down the results.
We are seeing tonight generational change in South Texas.
That's not an exaggeration. It's been many generations, in fact. Starr County, for one, flipped red for the first time since 1896. It's a South Texas swing fueling a Republican rout.
Our Hispanic communities aren't just leaving the Democrat Party. They're coming home to conservative values they never left.
President Trump won 14 of the 18 border counties this year. The Rio Grande Valley, all red for the first time this century.
What the Republican Party represents now is what we stand by.
Zapata County Republican Party Chair Jennifer Thatcher says the nationwide Republican performance was fueled by the problems in her own backyard.
Security of the border was a big deal for South Texas.
Yeah.
And it was something that was overlooked. The borders were literally open, whether they want to admit it or not.
It's just a real abject Democratic collapse.
After years of groundwork, Republicans are reaping the rewards.
We shouldn't be surprised by this for 2 reasons. One, Republicans have been telling us that they are trying to do this and have been making demonstrable efforts. And 2, I think there's been a tendency, particularly among Democrats, to underestimate the potential for Republicans succeeding in this.
For some Latinos, the switch is not a drastic shift, but a return home.
God, family, faith, it's everything that we embody as a Latino community.
Ryan Chandler, State of Texas.
Republicans also had the goal of flipping congressional seats in South Texas, and that led to some very close races on election night. Joining us to talk about a couple of the most competitive races is Sandra Sanchez with Border Report. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So Sandra, we spoke with you a few weeks ago about Democrat Vicente Gonzales defending his seat against former Republican Congresswoman Maya Flores. Gonzales won, but how did the margins compare to the last election?
Yeah, he did win. Gonzales is a Democrat. He went against a repeat challenge from Mayra Flores, the Republican. This time he won by 51%. She won by 48%. Last time he won by 52% and she won by 44%. But what's really interesting is the number of voters. Almost twice as many voters came out for Mayra this time. Last time she had just under 60,000 votes, and this time she had almost 98,000 votes. So, Vicente had 102,000. Last time he had 70,000. As we saw throughout the state, throughout the nation, record number of people coming out to vote this time.
So counties that voted for President Biden 4 years ago flipped red this year. What is driving this shift at the border, Sandra?
Yeah, 8 of the South Texas counties went for Trump this time. Of the last election, we only saw Zapata County, which is just to the west of Hidalgo, go for Trump. Everyone else was for Biden. You know, it had been talked about the last election there was going to be a red wave. It's been talked about that what this used to be a Democratic stronghold is now leaning Republican. I think the numbers obviously showed that. That is proof. I can tell you that here in Hidalgo County, I'm in McAllen, has always been more of a Republican area. The movers and shakers for this area have been Republican. And it's just in the last couple of years, they're coming out, so to speak. They're not afraid to say, we are Republican. The mayor was the chairman of the Republican Party for Hidalgo County. Although the mayoral race here in McAllen is not partisan, it's obvious which side he leans. And, this just showed it. Even in Cameron County, which has always been a Democratic stronghold, Republicans made tremendous gains. And that's where Congressional District 34 is that we just talked about.
The Democratic stronghold that you mentioned has existed in South Texas for decades. Was this shift so large surprising?
We've been hearing about it. I actually kind of expected it the last election. It was kind of surprising to me in these kinds of numbers, but I can tell you I was embedded in Congresswoman Monica de la Cruz. She represents Texas Congressional District 15, which includes McAllen. I was at her watch party. Election night, no one was concerned that she wasn't going to win another term, her second term. They weren't even paying attention to the boards. They weren't paying attention to the television screens. It was one big giant party, and everyone there just knew she was going to win. She won by bigger margins than she had. Again, it was a repeat challenger from 2 years ago, Michelle Vallejo. And, I spoke to University of Texas Rio Grande Valley political science professor Andrew Smith, and he said Democrats have just not reached their base. The residents in South Texas have been disenfranchised. The income here is low. They feel economy, obviously being a #1 issue here, as well as the rest of the state and the country, but immigration as well. They feel frustrated by it. And they came out in numbers and they voted.
Well, we know Democrats certainly aren't going to give up, but what is the party going to do in South Texas moving forward?
In South Texas, I haven't heard anything. As you know, the chairman of the Texas Democratic Party, Gilberto Hinojosa, has announced his resignation. He's actually from the Rio Grande Valley, and he says he's not going to hold this position anymore. So it signals that changes are definitely to come. The Republicans seem to be gaining speed. The Democrats seem to be licking their wounds, and no one's come up with any solutions here that I've heard of yet.
All right, Sandra Sanchez, thank you so much for being our eyes down in South Texas. It's very helpful.
Thank you.
Voters in a conservative Texas city reject a proposition that would have increased restrictions on women seeking abortions. Why the fight over the ordinance may not be over yet. Texas law already bans most abortions, but on Election Day, voters in Amarillo considered going a step further. A ballot measure called for adding restrictions on women trying to leave the city to get an abortion. Proposition A would have made it unlawful for a woman seeking an abortion to travel through Amarillo. It also would have made it unlawful to possess abortion-inducing drugs. People accused of violating the ordinance could face lawsuits. Supporters tried to get the Amarillo City Council to adopt the ordinance. When that failed, a petition put the proposition on the ballot for voters to decide. On Tuesday, voters said no, with 59% voting to reject the ordinance.
Read the ordinance, listen to what we had to say, and understand at the end of the day, this is a restriction on your right to bodily autonomy, freedom of speech, medical privacy, and right to interstate travel.
Supporters of the anti-abortion ordinance say they'll keep pushing for ways to stop what they call abortion trafficking.
We're going to fight for unborn children, but we're also going to fight for women who are the victims of abortion abuse. Women who don't really want abortion, but they're being pressured to get abortion by men who are trying to force them to get those abortions.
Backers of the ordinance vowed to work to elect new council members who would support future efforts to pass the measure. A former Democratic state representative who helped reform the Texas Medical Board in response to our investigation is heading to D.C. Congresswoman-elect Julie Johnson of Farmers Branch called her bipartisan bill, which became law last year, one of her proudest accomplishments. That law prevents doctors who've had their medical licenses suspended or revoked in other states from practicing in Texas. It also mandates round-the-clock physician monitoring through the National Practitioner Data Bank and public disclosure when doctors are disciplined. In an interview before she won the election, Johnson said she's eyeing broader patient protections in Washington.
I look forward to working with you on that. I'm sure that you and I can partner together just like we did with the medical board, and let's see what we can get done. Everyone who's committed to good medicine wants the safest environment to be a physician to practice as well as a patient to receive care. And so from that lens, we will always look for opportunities to improve that.
Johnson said she wants to look into whether any data bank records should be made public and look into whether there should be a national transparency law to help patients make more informed healthcare choices. Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle, and we'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics.